Hey guys, it's been a minute since I've done a decel shading video. Today we're going to be looking at Iceman. So while this one should be pretty straightforward, I do want to go over it anyway, just because you never know. Some of the figures that I've done have definitely seemed like they were going to be a lot easier than they ended up being. So we're going to get right into it. So to start with our tools, what we need is our Windsor brush cleaner and restorer. So keep in mind that while you can use acetone, it is much harder to work with. You do have to be much more careful, and it can possibly melt your plastics if you're not moving quickly enough. So this one is basically a much slower acetone, but just as good removal properties as acetone without nearly as much of the corrosiveness that it has. On top of that, we are going to have our just regular cotton swabs, as well as these pointed cotton swabs. And so that's the pointed side, and then these ones in particular have a regular side too. So you can see how different they are. And the pointed is really just so we can get into more detailed areas in the event that we have to. Besides that, we also have a bowl of water just in case, and then we have paper towels, of course. And before we get started, let's do a quick comparison against another Iceman. You can see that the Iceman that we have on my left-hand side is a different body mold, but the reason why we're looking is because the heads are pretty much the same mold. I believe this one in my left hand is a retro packaging Iceman, and then of course this is our cel-shaded one from the Amazing Friends 3-pack with Spider-Man and Firestar. Kind of weird that they released the cel-shaded one in there, but that's Hasbro for you. So in terms of what we actually need to do, we can see that we've got cel shading on his head, on his neck, on both arms, torso, both legs, hands, basically everywhere. We also see that his alternate hands also have cel shading, so we'll cover those too. Without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm going to use a smaller bowl and pour a little bit of our brush cleaner in there. And I'm going to start with the larger cotton swab head, just because I want to save the pointed side as I need it. So we're just going to start with from the bottom. And so I like to get off the paint and then rub it in water, because the chemical does kind of just sit on there. And if it does sit on there long enough, it can actually also be corrosive the way acetone is. So that's why I like to do it that way. And even though you can see that there's paint on there already, there's still enough chemical in here that it can still be very effective. Here is Iceman with his legs with the paint removed. As usual, the torso area, which includes the thighs, the upper thigh parts, not the lower part, is much harder to remove the paint from. So it does take a fair amount more effort to remove the paint from the torso area than from the limbs. So that's why, as you do either Iceman or any of the other figures, that way if you do it the same order that I do, if you move up the leg and then you're going to do the thigh next, then make sure that you wash off any of the chemical from the leg and then work on the thigh. That way you don't have the chemical just sitting on the leg for too long. All right, here he is with the arm paint removed. I went ahead and did the arms since they were going to be easy, like the legs, with the torso being the hardest. I wanted to save that for last. And then, well, actually, the head will be the very last, but there's a bit of cel shading paint right on his back, so we'll do that first just to get it out of the way. So I don't know if you saw it, but as I was trying to remove the paint from the side right here, I was actually needing to press the cotton swab into it to get more pressure to try to remove the paint, just because of how much harder and different that the plastic of the torso is. This does not want to come off. There's hardly any paint on this cotton swab, even though it's a fresh one. And it looks like nothing came off the chest so far. So that's unusual. This is really unusual. So you can see I was able to remove it from the neck, even though that was still difficult, but it still looks like I've removed nothing from the front side. So that's super weird. So since it doesn't seem to be working, I'm gonna go ahead and use acetone on it, and hopefully that will do it to remove it from the chest. I really, like I said, I really don't want to use acetone if I can help it, just because of how corrosive it is, but this doesn't seem to be coming off at all. So fingers crossed. It came off. However, you can now see that there are lines there on both sides because it was actually already melting through the plastic. That's how corrosive acetone is, even though I wasn't spending very long trying to get that paint off. So the last bit we have is the head, and I'm going to go ahead and use the pointed swab just because I do want to take my time. The only thing I'm worried about is actually hitting the eye, because those are painted white. And luckily, because they're just white, it won't be a big deal to repaint them if I really have to. But ideally, if I don't have to, that's even better. a lot is out, but he actually has quite a few grooves in the head. So I am glad that I have our pointed swab and we can get right to the grooves. So I couldn't quite get it all out of the ear or behind the ear. There's far more detail to it than I was expecting. And honestly, I kind of have a newfound respect for the mold that they used for Iceman's head. Considering how much detail there is, it's really all kind of taken away by the fact that it's all really the one color besides the cel shading. So you don't really get to really appreciate how much detail there is. So in any case, that's the figure. Overall, not too bad, but that chest part with the acetone, I'm not a big fan of. I don't know how well it comes off on camera, but the chest still looks kind of goofy and messed up. I'll probably maybe just take some sandpaper to it to try to smooth it out. Because it being kind of messed up like that isn't a great. So while I don't expect a lot of people being interested in decel shading Iceman, that is the figure. However, if you are interested in knowing how to decel shade Cyclops, Morph, or a slew of other figures, then I've got a whole playlist that you can check out right here.